The Oscar race is heating up. We have just heard from the National Board of Review, the LA and the New York film critics, but you haven't yet heard from Pete Hammond of Deadline Hollywood. I'm Tom O'Neill of Gold Derby. So Pete, are we any wiser? Help me out.
Are we any wiser? No,
because
Tom.
because of these.
But are we wiser because a few critics have made their choices? Are pardon the expression, the National Board of Review,
which are not critics?
I don't think we're any wiser because critics groups don't necessarily, as you know better than anybody, influence the Oscars. I only have to remind you of a few years where all the critics fell in line like lemmings behind The Social Network. And then the minute the industry started voting at the PGA, it was all over for that movie, and it became the King's Speech.
No, that's a very good example, but the year of The Hurt Locker, that gained early momentum through the Critics' Awards, and it was enough to bump it forward.
Yes.
I would argue that, in general, you're 100% right. For example, LA has not been right about Best Picture since The Hurt Locker.
Right.
They went with Boyhood last year, they went with Her, they went with all kinds of other things that had no bearing at all on the Oscar race. But what they do contribute sometimes is like the year where Cate Blanchett was ahead for Blue Jasmine, or last year where J.K. Simmons and Patricia Arquette consistently pushed through those early awards.
I do agree. Many years you have years like that. Helen Mirren and Forrest Whitaker went as a pair, winning actor and actress through all of these precursor awards, and so it almost made them inevitable because Academy voters do see headlines and they do see things like this, and it gets them, if they haven't seen it, to watch these movies. No question about that.
But we haven't seen that kind of consistency in the acting awards here, but we have seen a little bit of a trend for Spotlight. It was named Best Picture by the LA critics, Boston, the New York Online critics. It won the Gotham.
Yes, it won the Gotham. I don't put anything in the Gotham Awards. It's chosen by five frustrated critics, or whoever they are. And then, the Boston film critics voted for Spotlight, but the Boston online critics voted for Mad Max. In fact, did backflips for Mad Max. So go figure that. I thought Boston, of all towns, would be totally united on Spotlight, which of course takes place there, and it's about the Boston Globe, and these are all journalists. We thought, or I did, that Spotlight would be sweeping the entire critical fraternity here. It didn't win at the New York Film Critics, which picked Carol,
and then didn't pick the actresses. What's so amazing about that movie are the performances, and they brush right over those.
Yes, I guess, and with critics having loose rules, they could have tied both of them or something and presented it to both of them. Who knows? But also, the National Board of Review did not pick Spotlight either, so they
went with Mad
Max as well. So I wouldn't call this a sweep at all. We'll have to see more. The LA Film Critics, oddly enough, did go for Best Picture. I did not expect them to go for Spotlight. They had given the Best Director award to George Miller for Mad Max.
And Mad Max came in second for Best Picture in the vote for LA.
I think it's pretty close here. I don't think we have a scene set here where we're seeing that this is the way it's going to come down yet. I think we need some more evidence. And, as you mentioned, Boyhood did very well in all the critics' things, but I think that actually hurt Boyhood because it built up such expectations. A lot of Academy members I had spoken to last year had not seen the movie, even though it had been out since summer. And so they're watching it then with the idea that this is going to be the Best Picture.
Today, the Oscar voters got the DVD screener of Spotlight. So the studio did hold off a little bit before sending it. Now they're going to see it. We project at Gold Derby it's going to get 6 nominations. That's how many Boyhood had last year. That's usually not enough to win. Crash won with 6, Departed won with 5. In general, though, you need at least 7 or more. Argo had 7. The other movies have 9, 10, and all of that.
Well, the reason for that is you're talking about across the board support in the Academy.
Through the branches.
For all the branches, and most of the branches are crafts branches, or below the line branches, and that favors a movie, in my opinion, this year like The Martian, which has strong craft support, and so Spotlight's going to get actors, and that's the biggest branch, obviously. But I'm not so sure that The Martian is not the one to really look forward to right now as the front runner.
Let's talk about that, because you and I both know, I haven't even talked to you about this, I'm presuming here, that Ridley Scott is a formidable force to win Best Director. I think he's going to win it. We've seen a split between picture and director, whatever happens in the picture race. They did match up last year, but lately when they've split apart. It's been a director, a legendary director who has done some great achievement on screen, generally kind of all the bells and whistles, which he's done here. And so we could see a reverse kind of bandwagon effect or coattail effect, which we saw last year, where Inarritu wins Best Director, and Birdman, I think, won on his coattails rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
That could help Martian. If I'm right about Ridley winning, it could help The Martian win Best Picture too, right?
Yes, because I think The Martian is more of a Best Picture kind of thing. You know, remember, Ridley Scott would have been an Oscar winner were it not for Steven Soderbergh in the year 2000. When Gladiator won the Best Picture, that also was a kind of popcorn, very successful movie that came in and won a lot of the crafts things and then won Best Picture. But Ridley did not get Best Director. That went to Soderbergh for Traffic. And so Ridley is Oscarless, and as long as they do a smart campaign and keep reminding people that here's one of your favorite filmmakers, one of these guys that's a legend already, doesn't have one, he's 78 years old, you know, I mean, you really feel like it's his time to be honored, and he is out there. I saw him as recently as 12 hours ago. And actually, I skipped something where I could have seen him this morning. But, you know, he's everywhere, and, you know, he does have a feeling, I think, that this may be his time, as do I.
Yes, do you? At Gold Derby, right now, we predict 9 nominations for The Martian, Carol with 9, so those two movies would have the most. Generally, you need the most nominations to win. Last year, remember, Birdman had the most in a tie with Budapest Hotel. 8 nominations we predict for Mad Max, 7 for The Revenant, and 6 for Spotlight. The case for and against Spotlight, Pete, is no movie about journalists has ever won before.
Yeah.
But in its favor, it feels important. It has the rooting factor. You're rooting for these guys to have their quest and their expose proved right and to triumph in the end. And it has what movies used to need to win Best Picture, which is an all-star cast. In the old days, you had to have a lot of the big star faces on screen. Mm-hmm. Not so true anymore. We've seen movies like The Artist or The Hurt Locker win with unknowns on screen, but that's always a plus. And this movie, of course, has a million of them.
Yeah, it's got a big cast. So does The Big Short, which, by the way, I've talked to several people. I just came from something where I talked to several who's telling me, I'll tell you the one that's my favorite. It's The Big Short.
Wow.
And that's got a big cast, too. That's a huge ensemble cast. And I've talked to several people in the industry that really love that movie.
I heard some Academy members out of New York say the same thing.
Yeah.
The presumption is among the experts at Gold Derby that Spotlight will win SAG Ensemble. That's a 50-50 predictive rate of Gold Derby. I mean, of winning Best Picture at the Oscars. That's in its favor too.
Yeah. Hard to say. It's hard. I think that it will win the Ensemble Award. I mean, it seems to be preordained that it's going to win that. But I wouldn't discount The Big Short if Paramount can do a smart campaign for SAG, because that's got Brad Pitt and Christian Bale, and they're all great in it. Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, and then a supporting cast below them. That's a very effective kind of ensemble alternative to Spotlight if Spotlight falls by the wayside in any way, shape, or form here.
What other movies can win? I'm not going to ask you what will. We don't know yet. We still haven't seen the nominations for Globes and SAG and a lot of other tea leaves. But Revenant's going to have a ton of nominations. Carol will. What else can? You mentioned Big Short, Bridge of Spies.
I think Bridge of Spies is very popular with a certain faction in the Academy. I mean, it's the quality movie. It's from Steven Spielberg.
Did well at the box office.
It's got Tom Hanks, who's not only an Academy favorite, he's been on the Board of Governors for a long time. It's got Mark Rylance picking up some of these Critics Awards as well. In the supporting category, it's got great crafts. So I would not discount that. I think that's going to get several nominations. I think that holds through the whole thing here, all the way through the Oscars. I don't know that it could win. It would have to have.
Right. But it's on. But could Mad Max win? We predict 7 nominations for it. Look, it's rare that popcorn pictures win Best Picture, but Titanic did it. Lord of the Rings did it. This is getting enormous momentum. It's got that passion vote. We know that you need those #1 votes. It's not going to get support in the acting branch, but do you need it?
When was the last time a movie came in that is the 3rd sequel to a film that The previous 3 films got no nominations,
Right.
and all of a sudden you're saying it's going to be the best picture?
I'm asking, I'm not saying it
You're
won't.
drinking Warner Brothers Kool-Aid here. And the critics who are jumping on this bandwagon. Here's an example of a movie that's so well crafted. I think George Miller could get a Best Directing nomination. It's hard for me to believe, though, a lot of the Academy types are going to jump into the Mad Max world here.
But you mentioned just a minute ago about the support across those branches,
That's
lifting the
true.
thing up, and there are
That's
a lot of branches here that.
Yeah, this movie's got competition though in the uber-violent kind of action movie genre, like The Revenant and all of those, and The Hateful Eight. There's quite a few of those boys movies, as I say here, that may have a hard time. They could cancel each other out. I'm not so sure The Revenant will be as big as you're predicting here with 7 nominations.
Wow.
I think it's got cinematography for sure, and Leonardo DiCaprio for sure, and you know, maybe a couple of others, but I wouldn't guarantee it. It's polarizing. I've talked to many people who don't like it. I gave it a great review. I liked it, but I warned people in my review, it's not for everybody.
Right.
And I believe 20th Century Fox knows that, and they're taking measures now to try to sell it across the board because they're worried that it's a niche picture, kind of like The Tree of Life in that sense. I think there's a faction that will go for it and put it in the race in the end, but it's not going to be giant across the board here.
It's not going to win. Tree of Life was nominated for Best Picture,
Yes.
of course. Joy is Fox's other big contender here. This is a movie I love. I think it's a perfect movie, and I think
agree. I can't believe we agree on something.
But apparently the blogosphere, the cool crowd out there, doesn't agree with Pete.
You know what? Because David O. Russell has been nominated for Best Picture, his movies, the last
3 in a row, yes.
That's an amazing track record. 3 directing nominations in a row, 2 writing, 3 Best Picture nominations. I think it's takedown time for David O. Russell among the critical fraternity. We see this happen over and over and over. It's so unfair. This is a movie that I've talked to, the real people that see it here in the Academy, the ones I talked to seem to love it. They're really reacting. I was at the Academy screening. I actually moderated that the other day. And the crowd there loved it. I can name names for you of the people that are voting. It's also a very strong female empowerment movie, and I think that makes it sets it aside from a lot of these other pictures. It gives it a different kind of cachet going in, and we haven't seen Jennifer Lawrence really carry a movie in this way. You know, I mean, sure, she's carried the bow and arrow in Hunger Games, but I found the mop that she has in this picture a more potent weapon, because it's the weapon of female empowerment.
I love your passion and enthusiasm for this movie because I share it,
and I also think it's an actor's movie, and we know the actors branch is the most powerful one there.
But it just fell out of the top 10 at Gold Derby, or no, it's down at 8 now.
Yeah, I believe we had a conversation about this before, Tom, where you were saying it's second or something like that, and I just wanted to point out that no one had seen it at that point.
Trifle. Oh, who cares?
Always beware, there is a chance to see the movie before we declare the winners.
That ruins all the fun. Don't spoil our party here, Mr. Hammond. Hateful Eight has fallen out of the top 10. I don't understand this because I think they're making a mistake here. I remember seeing Django with a couple of our pals in this pundit fraternity, and both of them said to me after the screening, that's not getting nominated for Best Picture. Well, were they wrong? Of course, it got in. Quentin did not get in for director, but I think it's a player, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I loved Hateful Eight too. I thought it's a lot of fun. I think it's a comedy. You know, so I think this whole business of the Golden Globes, putting it in drama, which, by the way, I've been told they were submitted as a drama.
Right, I read your article, and Harvey
but only later did Harvey actually come in and Quentin himself and say it's a comedy. And when I saw the picture, I totally thought it was a comedy. And I actually laughed. I don't want to sound politically incorrect here and things.
But it is. It's preposterous,
It's preposterous.
In a fun
cartoon
way.
violence.
I know
the comic timing between Kurt Russell and Jennifer Jason Leigh is magic. She puts herself through the ringer like I think she and Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant should check into Cedars-Sinai together after what they go through in these films that they're doing. I mean, they're really taking one for the Gipper here or whoever. And I was impressed very much, but I love Tarantino, and there are people that don't. And it's 3 hours. So
Can Jennifer Jason Leigh win Best Supporting Actress? Quentin has delivered the winking devil roles wins for Christoph Waltz twice.
Yes.
And she's, of course, a really sneering devil in this. You root for her in a perverse way as an audience member.
Totally. Yeah, I think she could win. I don't get that vibe yet, out there.
Right. We haven't heard it out
But
there yet.
I think we have to wait and see when more people see this picture. They had a screening this over the weekend here in Los Angeles that was very successful with a lot of Academy people showing up. But I don't really know that it's going to translate into a win for her.
Room, does it have enough support for a Best Picture nomination?
I think so. Room's an emotional movie. It definitely has a core amount of support. I see Room, if there's 9 or 10 nominations, I see Room creeping in there because filmmakers, again, this is what we're talking about here. People in the industry that actually make films look at the degree of difficulty of that movie and what Lenny Abrahamson, the director, did shooting the first half in a 10-by-10 room to get that, and to get that emotion and to get it to work, and also a very strong actor's picture. I think Room actually has a lot of chances to get nominations below the line as well.
Brooklyn, there's a lot of love.
I love that movie too.
It really delivers emotionally. Saoirse is climbing up in these precursor awards. We talked about these others. Steve Jobs. Last time we chatted, Pete, you and I agreed that people weren't taking it seriously enough in this race.
Mm-hmm.
It is getting a great reception with Academy members,
yes.
right?
Yeah, they love it.
Some of the cynics in the blogosphere are going, oh, because of that box office problem, they're writing it off. But it should be ranked higher than 9.
I don't think the box office thing's going to matter much. The Academy members, at least most of them, don't look at box office. They're not even aware of it when you talk to them. But I have talked to several that have seen Steve Jobs in the last few weeks, and they're still raving about it, and particularly Michael Fassbender. Love him in this movie, and he won the LA Film Critics, so that's good. I think Steve Jobs is in there. I think Straight Outta Compton from Universal.
Yes.
If I had to guess one over the other, I'd definitely say Straight Outta Compton. And they're doing a great campaign, and I don't want to drop names, but I was at Donna Langley's house this weekend, and she had a big party for Straight Outta Compton, and all the cast and everything. And this is the head of, one of the key people at Universal, putting this kind of weight behind it here, and they're doing a great campaign on it. So I think that movie might have a better shot than Steve Jobs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Creed. Now, here's a
yeah.
far out idea here, Pete, but run with me with this. It was
Yes.
about 40 years ago that we, in the pundit sphere of that era, thought that this other movie about journalists would win Best Picture called All the President's Men, and this little movie called Rocky came out and pulled off a big upset, of course. I don't think it can win, but can it get on the list of Best Picture nominees?
I think so, and I actually just wrote a piece for our awards line, print edition, where I speculated that Warner Brothers came out of the box this year thinking Black Mass, the Whitey Bulger movie with Johnny Depp, and then thinking Mad Max, because all of a sudden people are talking Mad Max. I think the one that they should be aware of here is Creed.
Right.
It's done extremely well. It's doing well. There's a lot of love all of a sudden in this town for Sylvester Stallone again. And Michael B. Jordan's great in it. Yeah. It delivers on every level, but it's almost as great a story as the original Rocky, when Stallone held back that script only if he could star in it, and it was a real rags to riches story there. And I think you almost have that again. This young director coming out of USC, one little indie movie, Fruitvale, convinces the star to put those get back in the ring one more time, and then it turns out so good. I think the industry might like that.
Might respond to it. Danish Girl has fallen in our rankings, but I think that's very foolish. This movie's going to have a lot of support across the board in the branches. It's doing very well out there. I think it peaked early, and that's what some of the fatigue is recently about it, because we saw it at Toronto, and the critics are kind of now moving things higher up on their prediction lists. Where do you stand on Danish Girl?
I like the Danish Girl a lot. I have been saying, I think Focus Features a few years ago had a movie called Atonement. It got shut out of all the guilds. It got shut out of everything. It got nowhere except the Golden Globes, but it was unfortunately for them, the one year the Golden Globes were struck by the Writers Guild and they weren't televised, so nobody even remembers that it won there. But I think it can be compared to Atonement, because I think the same sort of thing could happen again. Once you get to the Academy, they're going to be the savior for this movie.
Yes, I agree.
And because it's right up their alley, unless something's happened with the Academy that I've known over these years. This is really something that they'll respond to.
What last thought should we throw in here? Anything else?
Okay, about this. Well, you know,
anything.
look, I think this is the races, Oscar races for me are all about momentum. Here we are, you know, in the beginning of December, essentially. It's a long way to go. A lot of people still talk, hey, the Oscar race is going to begin pretty soon, aren't they? You know, I hear that all the time. I said, where have you been, buddy? This has been going on forever. But in a lot of people's minds, it's just happening. They're just getting around to looking at their screeners and that sort of thing. So I do think it's all about momentum. I think Spotlight's in a good position because it's going to get Academy members to look at this DVD that just landed in their laps very late in the game. It's all a strategy on their part. It's interesting that it comes from Open Road, which is Tom Ortenberg, who did Crash when he was at Lionsgate and really reinvented the idea of how you send out screeners, and you keep sending them out and you make sure it's blanketed. And here, they've been the one movie that's been holding back, and I wonder if that strategy is a bit of a mistake. I always think if you have the thing, you can get it out at Thanksgiving, and they certainly had the ability to do that, and they didn't do it. Their idea, obviously, is be late, be on top of the stack. It'll be the first one pulled off.
And we knew it would do well. The Critics Awards, because they're journalists voting on a movie about journalism.
Right,
so,
would do well.
So they would do this
and that
well this
would
week.
get all the headlines.
Maybe it's
and
a
so
good
they're going to do
strategy.
it. It could be a good strategy. It could not be. I don't know. It depends.
But the year of Crash, I remember one very famous screenwriter turning to me. He said, you know, I belong to a lot of guilds. I've now gotten 6 effing DVDs of Crash. Make it go away.
Well, the other problem for Spotlight that's not Crash, if you want to compare it to that, is that Crash had come out in May. And so they had plenty of opportunities to, you know, and it didn't cost them that much money to throw all these DVDs at the entire town over and over and over again. And it worked. It was a great strategy. Here they've got a movie in theatrical release and they want to keep it that way, so they don't want to overdo it with the DVD angle this time. So we'll see. But so far and counting, I've already gotten 2.
Okay. Thanks, Pete.